Well, today is certainly a day of Thanksgiving. It is a day of giving thanks for our mothers. It is a day of giving thanks for the mamas in our lives. It is an opportunity to remember and to lift up all the women who have made a difference in our day-to-day existence. But today is also a day to give thanks for all the different ministries we do here at Emmanuel United Church of Christ. Ministries that are designed to take care of, nurture, and watch over other people's bodies. So today we want to give thanks to God for our Shepherd's Pantry. We want to give thanks for our Garden of Hope. We want to give thanks for our Thursday Tai Chi classes. And we want to give thanks to God for our partnership with Edwards and Back Bay Mission. We want to give thanks to God today for our sanctuary and for our cozy seats and our chairs and our tables. Because by affirming and caring for human bodies, we are physically proclaiming and sharing the good news of the resurrection. From sunrise to sunset, until the end of the ages, bodies matter, and bodies matter to God. Can we get an amen? Amen. Our bodies matter, and our bodies matter to God. Now this year, life has taught me a new lesson. And it's a lesson that hasn't been very easy to learn. You know, since 2010, having the blessing to be called to serve here at Emmanuel United Church of Christ, I have experienced in Highlands County front row seat of what it actually looks like when human bodies age. For the past 14 years, I have watched, starting as a 40-year-old, which sounds so young when you think about it, watching how age manifests. You know, you start noticing it when you go shopping in Publix, and you start walking behind someone, and you're watching the pace in which they walk, or the gait in which they walk, or the intentionality in which people take steps. Or you start watching people who choose the elevator over the stairs. But now, 14 years later, I am the person who is experiencing what it's like when your knee aches, when your hip pops, when the ankle says ouch, and the thigh says no thank you. So I had to laugh this morning thinking about when we ask people to stand, there are probably lots of people who are saying, you know what, I am much more comfortable just sitting, leave me alone. Because I'm at that place where getting into the car is not easy, and standing up out of a sofa that sinks is not easy. Jim, I'm looking at you, and I'm thinking, I do not want to be sitting in that sofa right now. You know, thanks to walking hours on end in dress shoes and stretching when I should have been icing and exercising when I should have been relaxing and Googling when I should have really been going to the doctor, 2024 has really been a lesson in what it is like to have an aging earthly body. And now I'm realizing just how low our car seats and our living room couches really are, and how difficult it can be to stand up or to sit down. And now I'm realizing way too late in the game that when my mom or my grandmother were complaining about a seat being too low or the couch being too far back, that they weren't being melodramatic. They were actually sharing their lived truth. And now I'm at the point where I'm looking at furniture, I am looking at chairs, I'm even looking at toilet seats. And I'm now wondering why, when we know people age, and after the age of 50, things become difficult, Are we not naturally making our chairs and our car seats and our couches higher up and more raised? And I'm also sitting here realizing that whoever selected this chair, thank you, because this is the most perfect height for someone my age. So why, when we know that people age and our bodies change, are we not building or producing things that automatically accept that fact and have that fact built into it? I mean, toilet bowls really don't need to be that low to work, do they? So today, I am so much more cognizant of what happens to the body. But over the past 2 months, what I've really become cognizant of is how what happens to your body actually can affect your mood. It can affect your energy. What happens to your body can affect your day-to-day decision makings. It can affect how you see yourself. And I'm embarrassed to say that I'm realizing that what happens to our body can also determine when you're cooking in the kitchen and something falls, if you're going to pick it up at that moment, or if maybe it could wait a few hours or the next day when you sweep up the place. Last week at Disney, there was a child who just ran up the flight of steps. And I was so jealous of them. So since January, there are 3 important lessons that have been learned. 1, how to now better pastor people as they age, having a glimpse into what that process is like. 2, and this is really important, making sure that I myself don't give in to despair and that I find a way to safely have an active and fulfilling life, even if my body is not always participating the way I want it to. And 3, knowing that what happens to the body does indeed affect your mind, your spirit, and that all 3 are wonderfully, woefully entwined. And you know, a lot of this is what Paul is addressing in his letter to the church in Corinth. As we shared last week, Paul is writing this letter to a church in Corinth that is the first of its kind, that is doing a brand new thing, and they're trying to figure out what does it mean to worship and follow Christ when all of them come from such diverse backgrounds and they all have their own opinions and their own beliefs. Now, it's important for us to understand that in this church in Corinth, there is a group of members who are Jewish, and they were raised to believe that they were created in God's image. They were raised to believe that God lovingly made and molded us by hand in God's image and infused us with God's Spirit. So for the Jewish people, they have been raised for centuries with the understanding that you do not separate body, mind, and soul, but body, mind, and soul are all one. For this group of people, bodies matter, which means that because bodies matter, God cares if bodies are fed or cared for or shown respect. But then there's a whole other group of people in this church, and a lot of them are coming from a more Greek background, and they're coming from a whole different theological thread. There's a group of people in this particular congregation who have been taught and believe that the body and the spirit are 2 complete entities. But not only that, they see the body as a tomb. They see the body as a cell. They see the body as something that you are trapped in. They see the body as a terrible place to be. And what happens for the people who separate the body and the soul and see the body as a jail cell, what that means is they can ignore the issues surrounding human bodies. What that also means is if the soul is trapped in the body and the body doesn't matter, you have permission to mistreat bodies. that you can abuse bodies. It also means you can overindulge and misuse your body. You know, these are the people who would whip themselves out of penance. These are the people who would gorge on food or drink or use their beliefs so they could physically mistreat and abuse others. Because if bodies don't matter, then it doesn't matter what you do to another person's body. And so this group of individuals, they're having a really hard time. They are having a hard time understanding about the resurrection. They can't comprehend why the resurrection of Jesus Christ matters. For this group, Jesus dying on the cross meant absolutely nothing. Easter makes no sense to them because they don't care about human bodies. Instead, this group of people who are attending the church in Corinth are taking this brand new Christian faith, and you know what they're basically doing? They're using their faith to say, I'm better than you. They're using this faith to look down upon others and to judge them. And so what Paul does is he writes this really extensive theological reflection in chapter 15. And regardless if Paul gets it right, or regardless if everyone agreed with him, or if you agree with him, there is something so beautiful that Paul does in today's reading. What Paul basically says is bodies matter. In chapter 15, what Paul is basically saying is your body matters. My body matters. Their body matters. To a congregation that has been stirred up with upheaval and disagreements, Paul is saying bodies matter, and bodies matter to God. And in verse 38, Paul mentions that God has given each of us our own body. But then, in verse 39, Paul does something so absolutely amazing and revolutionary. Paul says that not only has God given each of us a body, but that there are bodies that aren't even human. Paul says there are bodies that are animals, and there are bodies that are birds, and there are bodies that are fish. This is amazing. I hope you're hearing just how progressive Paul is being 2,000 years ago, because Paul is acknowledging that God just didn't create human beings. Paul is saying that God made the body of the dog that you take care of. God made the body of the birds that you are feeding outside. God made the bodies of the fish that are in Lake Jackson. But Paul doesn't even stop there. Paul goes on to mention the glorious bodies of heaven. He mentions the body of the sun, the body of the moon. And then when it comes to the stars, Paul says stars differ from each star in their own personal glory. Wow. Paul starts off in chapter 15 by trying to articulate the importance of the resurrection, but then he steps into this magnificent moment in which Paul says, not only has God given each and every one of us our own human body, but God has given a body to the animals. God has given a body to the fish of the sea. God has given a body to the sun that's in the sky. That God has given a body to each and every individual star that's in the galaxy. For Paul, bodies matter. And it's not just human bodies that matter. All bodies matter. For Paul, since bodies matter, then the resurrection matters. And since we are more than soul and mind, since our earthly flesh is not a tomb and our bodies are not a jail cell, the resurrection matters. For Paul, the resurrection is not just about an idea. For Paul, the resurrection is not about an apparition. For Paul, the resurrection is not a reason to paint eggs on Easter. For Paul, the resurrection is God's validation that the life Jesus lived in the flesh mattered. For Paul, the resurrection is a validation that our bodies do matter. Our entire beings matter. From the hairs on our head to the soles of our feet, from the joyful leaping of a youth in Disney World to the aches in our knees when we get inside the car, our bodies matter. What happens to our bodies matter, and what happens to the bodies of others matter. What happens to the bodies of all creation matters. So with this knowledge, with this validation, we can hold on to hope, and we can seek and we can find out joy. We are welcome the insurance that God sees us, that God cares about all we do, God cares about all we experience, God cares about how we feel. And the idea and the imagery of the resurrection means that our ever-aging and our ever-changing bodies do indeed matter to God. It means that every one of our bodies here today are worth redemption. It means that what we do with our bodies and what we do and for other people's bodies does matter to God. So thank God for our Shepherd's Pantry that feeds hungry bodies. Thank God for our garden of hope that allows bodies that may ache or pain to be able to grow and produce. Thank God for our Tai Chi classes that allow bodies to exercise and stretch. Thank God for our partnership with Edwards and Back Bay Mission that allows our bodies to do ministry and validates the bodies of our sisters and brothers in Biloxi. Thank God for our sanctuary. Amen. Thank God for our chairs. Thank God for our table. Thank God for the gift of coffee and water that allows our bodies to be cared for and to feel good. Because we, as Emmanuel United Church of Christ, by affirming and caring for human bodies, we are physically proclaiming and sharing the good news of Jesus Christ with everyone around us. We are physically embodying and proclaiming the good news of the resurrection from sunrise to sunset until the end of the ages. Bodies matter, and bodies matter to God. And for that, let us say, Amen. Amen.